Hi, I'm Batu from freefincal, and today let's talk about if mutual funds can fail like banks. And this is a question asked by a viewer, and I thought it's an important question to answer. So, the short version is mutual funds can fail, anything can fail, any establishment can fail, but not like banks. Of course, we should first define what a bank failure is. So, a bank failure is, or a bank going bust, it means that people have lost trust on the bank because of some malpractice or some kind of fraudulent or activity or some kind of information that's not been disclosed in the public and that comes out when an RBI conducts a detailed audit and so on. The public has lost trust in the bank, the shares start falling, people want to take their money out, that's called a bank run, and the bank has given too many loans which are bad, and those people don't pay back, those organizations or people don't pay back and they've run away with the money, or there is some kind of bank, some kind of fraud in which the bank employees, that is the top tier employees have cooked up the books in some ways to create loans or something of that kind, and that has led to the loss of trust and so on when it's eventually disclosed and so on. So that's called a bank failure. That's how we'll define a bank failure or a bank going bust and so on. In the case of a mutual fund, what does it mean? What does a mutual fund going bust or mutual fund failing means? First of all, we should understand that a bank has got a primary job. The primary job of a bank is borrowing money from investors like you and me, and saying I will give you this much interest, and lending money to institutions at a higher interest rate typically, so that they can the difference is the profit and so on. That's the primary job of a bank. Of course, there are other activities, but this is the now this in this activity there is no third party involved. It's a two party structure. Of course, there's a regulator, the RBI. That's a different matter. That's an external body, but the arrangement between the borrower and the bank, between the lender and the bank, is just there are just two people involved, and this can go wrong in many ways, like I said. But in the case of a mutual fund, it's organizationally it's a completely different structure, and we need to recognize this to understand why a mutual fund cannot fail like a bank. So I talked about what bank failure means. We'll go past that. If you look at this is the management structure of SBI. I'm sure that typical similar banks would have a very similar structure. So it's got a chairman and it's got deputy managing directors and then different officers and so on and so on. And there's it's a pyramid that goes down. There is no other external or independent body present in this. Like I said, it's a two-party arrangement. I give money to the bank and they have to give me interest, or the bank gives money to somebody else and they have to pay the interest to the bank. So that's just that. In the case of a mutual fund, the structure itself is completely different, and it is, I would say that it's been done very intelligently right from the start. A mutual fund is set up as a trust. If you look at if you go to Google and search for structure of a mutual fund, you will see this picture, which is taken from PPFAS AMC. In the same picture, you will see in different colors: blue, yellow, green, and so on. I don't know, it's some standard picture which everybody seems to have reproduced. So this is from PPFAS. You can see the color. So a mutual fund is set up in the form of a trust. What is a trust? In the case of a trust, unlike a two-party arrangement, a trust is a three-party arrangement where there is a person who is giving money to somebody, and that person has to manage that money, but there is a third person, which is the trustee, which takes care of this whole arrangement, which oversees the whole arrangement. So in the case of a mutual fund, you have a sponsor who is going to float the company. They are going to create this AMC company, and they also create a trust, a board of trustees, and the board of trustees will manage, or rather will oversee the management of the mutual fund, and there is a custodian who will actually hold the actual assets on the books, and the AMC will appoint a fund manager who will do the management of these assets. Now, the key point is two-thirds of the board of trustees in a mutual fund should not be part of the sponsors. They should not be linked to the sponsor. They should be independent of the sponsors of the AMC. And in the AMC board itself, half the directors in the AMC board must not be part of the sponsors. They must be independent. Therefore, the key point is uh, this structure. If you look at it, it's completely internal. Everything is decided by the organization. So if a few people decide to commit fraud, it is so much more easier for people in a bank, in general, to commit fraud. The collusion is so much more easier. In the case of a mutual fund, collusion is so much more difficult because there is a board. The board of trustees has got a significant, or the majority of people of the board of trustees are independent. They are not part of the sponsors, and therefore committing fraud in the case of mutual fund becomes so much. The probability becomes significantly lower. I'm not saying it is zero. I'm saying it is significantly lower than in the case of a bank. And also, uh, in the case of a bank, the main job is not to. I mean, they don't. They are not saying, "Look, I will take your money, I will invest it in shares, and I will give you the gains and so on, or I will give you the interest from the bond coupon rates and so on." That's not what a bank says. A bank says, "You give me money, I will give you a fixed interest rate." What they do with the money is not in uh, the I mean the lender, the person who gives the money to the bank for in exchange for interest, has no control on what the bank will do, or has no idea what the bank will do with that money. In the case of a mutual fund, there is a lot more transparency. If I give money and in exchange for units, if I become a unit holder of a mutual fund, I know where that money is going to be spent. There is a portfolio disclosure. I know how what is the expense ratio and how much is the gain. Everything can be tracked. So there's a lot more um, transparency in terms of what a mutual fund does. Of course, the aim of a mutual fund is different from the aim of a bank. That's a different matter. But then this question is a very interesting question. Can a mutual fund fail like a bank? Can a mutual fund go bust like a bank? The answer is no, they cannot. It's organizationally, operationally, simply not possible. Of course, if you're saying, can there be fraud in the trustee board and so on? Can they cook up the books and so on? Anything is possible. Anything terrible is possible. But the motivation to do fraud in the case of a mutual fund is significantly lower because of the way in which it operates. I mean, the primary job of a mutual fund is to manage assets and provide returns to the unit holders, and this is guarded by the trustees. Therefore, there is no. I mean, you can't. There's no question of approving bad loans, or giving loans to people who are who don't have a reputation, and so that kind of fraud is possible in a bank. That kind of fraud is not relevant in a mutual fund. The other question is, can a mutual fund run away with our money? It is again extremely difficult because of this organization. I mean, there are too many different people to see. I mean, if there are 2-3 people in the same organization, it's easier to commit fraud. It's easier to convince them to commit fraud. But there's a much bigger body. They're independent. Most of them are independent. They're not part of the sponsor, and therefore it's difficult. So, of course, some kind of fraud is always possible that we don't know. I mean, for example, I would say that the mutual fund saying, for example, let's say a mutual fund gives money to some bond issuer, and they go and agree with the bond issuer, like what happened recently. They go and agree that, okay, we will not call your bond as default. We will wait for 6 months. Then you pay us back the money. I would say that's close to fraud. That kind of behavior, that kind of malpractices can happen in a mutual fund. Unit holders need not be protected, but then SEBI is tightening the screws slowly. Of course, it has to see where the screw is loose, then only it can tighten. that's happening. So it's a process. It's a trial and error process of because if you, for those who remember, prior before the SEBI regular rules of 1996, mutual funds can operate with enormous freedom. Monday it can be a equity fund, Tuesday it can be a debt fund, Wednesday it can be an equity fund, and so on. They can do all that. Today that's not possible. They have to disclose fundamental changes in attributes and so on. So it becomes so much more difficult for them to to do whatever they want, and certainly fraud per se is significantly less probable. So that's what I wanted to say. Bye bye.